Welcome to the X Global News Channel. Let's move on to the news. HIMARS multiple launch rocket systems, MLRS, previously transferred to Ukraine, were modified by the U.S. Army so that they could not be used to launch long-range missiles. This is reported by the Wall Street Journal with reference to high-ranking American officials. The modification was made in order to prevent the Ukrainian troops from striking the territory of the Russian Federation. Earlier, the U.S. authorities repeatedly refused to provide Kyiv with longer-range missiles than those currently in service with the Ukrainian army and used for the HIMARS MLRS. Thus, the United States seeks to prevent further escalation of the conflict out of fear that Russia will use more serious weapons, or the countries of the North Atlantic Alliance will be directly involved in the confrontation and the fighting will spread beyond the territory of Ukraine. Russia still continues to produce cruise missiles, despite anti-Russian sanctions. This is reported by the New York Times, NYT. Sources of the publication claim that at least one of the X-101 missiles that hit critical infrastructure facilities in Ukraine was produced no later than October 2022. At the same time, Moscow cannot receive semiconductors and other electronic components. The newspaper believes that Russia either established alternative supply channels for electronics, or it had significant reserves before the start of the special operation. Pentagon officials claim that since February, Russia has fired many long-range shells and missiles, and it is unclear how many weapons are in the arsenals of the Russian armed forces. News from the Washington Post: Kyiv unofficially confessed to attacks on Russian airfields. The attacks on military airfields in the Kursk, Ryazan and Saratov regions were carried out by Ukraine. This was reported to the Washington Post by a senior Ukrainian official on condition of anonymity. At the same time, official Kyiv continues to remain silent. The interlocutor of the newspaper reported that all three attacks were carried out by Ukrainian drones. How exactly Kyiv should do this and which drones were used is not reported. This is the second such unofficial recognition of Kyiv through major American media. The day before, the New York Times newspaper, citing a Ukrainian official, wrote that the drones were launched from the territory of Ukraine. Meanwhile, earlier, the head of the State Department, Antony Blinken, said that the United States had nothing to do with the strikes on Russian territory inflicted by the Ukrainian military. He stressed that Washington did not help or encourage such actions by Ukraine. Russia's representative to the UN Natalia Karmazinskaya accused Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky of playing with the lives of Ukrainians and Europeans when he gives orders for attacks on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, NPP. This is reported by TASS. The United States and its allies continue to ignore what is happening and are in no hurry to reason with the Zelensky regime, which is actually playing with the lives of not only its country, but also the entire European continent, said an employee of the Russian mission to the World Organization. The diplomat noted that Moscow has done everything in its power to safely conduct the mission of the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, to the NPP, despite provocations from the Ukrainian side. Time magazine recognized the president of Ukraine Zelensky as the Person of the Year. The American edition of Time recognized Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky as the Person of 2022. This was announced on the air of the NBC channel by a representative of the magazine. The Person of the Year, according to Time magazine, was the President of Ukraine Vladimir Zelensky, as well as the Spirit of Ukraine. The magazine has been selecting candidates for the title of Person of the Year since 1927. The European Commission has presented the 9th package of anti-Russian sanctions. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announced the completion of the preparation of the next, 9th package of sanctions against Russia. According to the head of the EC, the new sanctions list will include 200 individuals and legal entities related to the Russian armed forces, as well as enterprises of the military-industrial complex. In addition, restrictions will be imposed against a number of civil servants, ministers, and governors. The new restrictions will affect 3 banking institutions, including the All-Russian Regional Development Bank. Financial institutions will be prohibited from conducting monetary transactions with European counterparties. Chemical, nerve agents and electronics that can be used for military purposes will fall under the sanctions. A ban is being imposed on the direct export to Russia of components for the production of drones. At the same time, it also applies to any third countries, such as Iran, that could supply drones to Russia. Der Leyen also announced restrictive measures against the Russian energy and mining sector, including a ban on new investments in the mining industry in Russia. The draft U.S. defense budget includes $6 billion to contain Russia in Europe. The draft U.S. defense budget agreed by the relevant committees of both chambers of Congress assumes the allocation of over $6 billion to deter Russia in Europe, according to a document released on Tuesday evening. As the rules-based international order faces challenges from Beijing and Moscow that threaten the security, freedom and prosperity of people around the world, the draft budget for this year includes the allocation of over $6 billion for the containment initiative in Europe, the draft says. The budget for the fiscal year 2023. The Hungarian Foreign Ministry said it would not train Ukrainian servicemen. Hungary is not going to train servicemen of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, AFU, because it believes that this could worsen the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. This was announced by the Secretary of State for Bilateral Cooperation in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Economic Relations of Hungary, Tamás Mencer. Some European countries are training Ukrainian soldiers. Hungary will not do this. We said no. We want to move not towards war, but towards peace, the Hungarian diplomat wrote on his page. Orbán called for a review of sanctions against Russia after Macron's words about the cost of the conflict for the EU. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán called for a review of sanctions against Russia, supporting the statement of French President Emmanuel Macron that the conflict in Ukraine affects the EU and the United States differently. President Macron is right, the price of the war between Russia and Ukraine is not the same on both sides of the Atlantic. If we want European industry to survive, we must quickly solve the problem of the European energy crisis. It's time to reconsider the sanctions, Orbán wrote on his Twitter page. Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas said that the country can no longer accept refugees from Ukraine. In this regard, she appealed to the Finnish government to allow the Finnish side to accept more Ukrainian refugees. I keep saying that up to now we have been generous, helping Ukraine in trouble. And I am proud of the people of Estonia who have opened their hearts. Naturally, everything has borders, and if we are simply no longer able to accept people, since we have no more housing and work here, while others can do more, Kallas explained on the Estonian radio station Radio 4. Claire Daly, a member of the European Parliament from Ireland, warned that Ukraine would not be able to return millions of dollars provided to it by the European Union after the conflict began. Daly drew attention to the fact that there is a nightmare shock therapy in the country, the sale of public land, the imbalance of the labor market and the sale of state assets. The future of the country is being sold off in order to finance a proxy war that is tearing this state apart, she stressed at a speech in the European Parliament. Daly believes that by accepting the help of the West, Ukraine has shackled itself in neoliberal shackles, because the precondition for this support was called the promotion of democracy in the country. Well, the economic affairs of the European Union are difficult now, as are the Ukrainian people. It is necessary, apparently, to endure to the bitter end and try to remove dependence on Russian supplies. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel, like it. We will be very grateful for such help. See you, friends.